Upstairs to the Right Music Channel, Sunday Live with Mike. Here on another wonderful day in Amsterdam. I had. Uh, Pihan, was that you? Are you here? Is that? Yeah, this is going to be a good one. This one is not for kids, so if you got kids listening in, turn off the channel right now. Yeah, this one's going to be kind of harsh. Yeah, so a little housekeeping first, as usual. I want to talk about upcoming shows. So next week, we are going to be doing a head-to-head show between the Epiphone SG that I just bought, the SG Standard, versus the Harley Benton. What is it? The SE Custom? Yeah. So we're going to talk about now. We're going to break it down into two parts to stretch it out. Well, actually, because there's so much information that I'm going to go through in this one, I'm really going to get into detail that I do have to break it down into two parts. So the first part of this is going to be talking about a side-to-side comparison, and we're going to go through all the specs of those. So that'll be interesting. And then we'll do our live stream, of course, this time next Sunday. And then the following week's show I'm excited about, we're going to take our first road trip in quite a while. We're actually not far. We're going to go visit a music store that just opened up here in Amsterdam. A guy from Boston, I believe he told me, flew over here and opened up a music shop. So we're going to sit down and talk to him about why he decided to do that. And also we're going to talk to him about the tube amp situation that we discussed in length on this channel. So you got that to look forward to. Hope you tune in for those. They're going to be really interesting, I think. Entertaining nonetheless. Okay. So yeah, Tokyo. All right. We got to go back a little bit. So we need to go back to. Okay, so last week we talked about how I was working for Babyface and in Motown, and generally doing studio runs in LA, doing whatever. Sometimes engineering, sometimes playing stuff. Sometimes doing remixes. I did a lot of remixes for Motown for a lot of their groups. But it was really hand to mouth kind of living. And at the time, I was 26, going on 27, and I really was living hand to mouth at that time, living that kind of lifestyle. The intern job at Babyface Studios, as I said, was not paid, but there were some gigs in there that were paid, but you never got paid. Like I said, they still owe me money, but it's just one of those things, and that's actually what led to Japan. Let me explain to you the studio system for those of you who don't know it. So you have a situation where the studio processes all of payments. And if you're working for a subdivision of, for example, Universal, and you're in an affiliate company like, was Universal, I believe, I'm not sure, it's hard for me to remember, but his label was a subdivision of that major label. So that means that all invoices for any kind of payments for anything had to first go through his desk, through the label, the sub-label, and then they forward that onto the major label. This process could take anywhere between 3 to 4 months to get paid. And for the paid gigs that I had during that internship, the stuff that they said, okay, we need you to record such and such, or we need to do such and such, and you got paid for it. Okay, well and fine, but you're talking about 2 months rent, and it's going to take 3 to 4 months to get, and you needed it 2 months ago. So, yeah, it was not the kind of situation where you were really cash flush. The music business is a business that is, that is just set up in innumerable ways that you will not get paid for your work. It's been that way since day one. As I began to discover this reality, the opportunity came up through a friend of mine, Robert Turner, who was a keyboard player, excellent keyboard player, about getting together a combo group. If I could get together a female singer, I could go over to Japan and tour for 3 months, work in a nightclub. It paid pretty well, cash money, and then you got to come back. And they put you up, they flew you over, and they put you up for that time that you were there in an apartment. And so, to me at that time, I said, well, if I could go over there for 3 months, just 3 months. If I could go over there for 3 months and, earn some money, then that would be good. At least that way, when I got back, I could pay my rent out a couple of months, and then and my car note, and I'd have some time. Actually, no, I didn't have a car note. I always pay cash for my car, so let me strike that. That's not a true statement. I never had a car note. I always paid cash. I think it was more like pay for repairs on my secondhand cars. Actually, I bought mostly Jeeps because I could take those apart myself and put them back together. I mean, I was pretty mechanically inclined. Back in the 70s, when you were in school, they had something called, you had shop class, you had, homemaking class, and you had auto shop, if you were lucky enough. And so, I know that they stopped doing that. That's a shame too. Because even if you don't go on as a career in mechanic, you can learn things that just help you out just in keeping your own cars together. But so I didn't have much but my rent, but I wanted to pay that out. And of course, I always wanted to buy gear. The gas has been around for a long time. I said to Robert, okay, I think I can get a singer. I knew a girl named Naomisha Wilson who I was doing demo work with. If I had a song that I wrote and I needed somebody to come in and sing it, I would bring her in. At that time, I really wasn't doing a lot of vocal work. I was mostly trying to write stuff for female R&B artists because that was the hot thing at the time. That's the game that you wanted to be in at the time. Regardless of who you were. So I said to Naomisha, how does that sound to you? And she says, I had been there already. She had already gone. And she was kind of anxious to go. So I said, okay. So in December of 1995, I left Los Angeles with Naomisha and flew to Tokyo, Japan. Now, I'm going to skip around. I'm going to lay down what it was like being in Tokyo in the 90s. But then in terms of some of the stories that I'm going to tell, I'm going to skip around a little bit because it ended up being a long time. That is 18 years in total. Not consecutively, but a total of 18 years I spent living in Japan. And really, at that time in the 90s, you have to understand the bubble had burst. The great Japanese bubble were in the late 70s and the 80s. They were buying up everything from Rockefeller Center to most of Hawaii. And that era in Japan really was something. It was a money era. A lot of cash floating around. A lot of cash that was available to be had during that time. And really, for somebody like me at that time, 26, 27 years old, it was a very good opportunity. For Naomisha too, she was a little bit younger. She was 20. Hey, good evening. She was a little bit younger, but she had experience touring. Her family was a music family, singers or rappers or musicians. So I knew them very well, the Wilsons very well. They're a very talented family. So really, with her knowing the gist of it, I wasn't so nervous because she had been there before. She knew the lay of the land, and she knew how things went. So wasn't a complete fish out of water situation, but for me to go over to Japan, it was a dream come true. It was one of those countries that you just want to go to, that you know you really dream about going to, and there I was at a relatively young age on my way. So I worked for a guy named Hirano, and Hirano had a whole bunch of bookings for medium sized to large size nightclubs throughout Japan. And so my first booking was in Yokohama, working for a hostess club. Now, a hostess club in Yokohama. Yokohama is not that far from Tokyo. It's about a 35-minute express train ride, but in any case, not that far from the main city, the major city. By car, it'd take you about 40 minutes, 45 minutes. So we were there in Yokohama working at a hostess club. Now, a hostess club, I have to explain to you out there who will watch this who may not know what a hostess club is. A hostess club in Japan is a club that caters to men who want to sit around and have conversations with very young, attractive women and drink and flirt and do all those things. The girls are professionals. Their job is to keep the men drinking because that ups the tab, but also to engage them in conversation, to keep them interested, to keep them engaged so that they stay longer. And some of these clubs went from the really low rent ones to ones like the Baby Grand, which were actually, you know, all wood interior. Very beautiful interior of this club. I'll do a little bit of a setting what it looked like in the inside. Wood floors, wood paneling on the walls. They had a Baby Grand piano sitting in the room, in the middle of the room. That's where I sat. And there was no uprise stage. It was all flat floor. So Naomisha just stood in front of the piano with her microphone. And the rest of the room was surrounded by tables and couches with tables against the walls. And this is where the hostesses would sit and they would converse with their customers. Now, if you want to get a better idea of what that looked like in the 90s, there's a movie on, actually a series on Netflix called The Naked Director. And that particular film is set in Japan during the era that I was there. And you'll see an example of a hostess club in that series. Again, actually a big one. The one in that was, we're talking about movie theater size. Yeah, it got like that. It got crazy. There was crazy money in Japan, and still floating, even though the bubble had burst by that point. So the Baby Grand was a hostess club. I'd say about 12 girls. And they were all dressed up in the most hideous dresses you could imagine. And I swear, if you went to a hostess club today, the girls would still be wearing that same dress. It's like a bridesmaid dress, you know, in different colors and shapes and forms. But basically, that's the best way I can describe a hostess uniform. The outfits, so they wore high heels, a lot of makeup. Hair done to the nines, nails done to the nines, wearing always with a Gucci bag, a Prada bag, a Fendi bag. And where did these bags come from? Well, they came from the customers. All right. So Naomisha and I, our job was to go to the Baby Grand and perform 45-minute sets. So it would be 45 on, 15 off. We do this from around 8 p.m. until 1 a.m. Yeah. With a half-hour break at some point, I think around 9:30 or 10, we would get a break. and we were able to go out and grab something to eat. Fortunately, it was located in an area where there were a lot of places you could run off and get a quick bite if you needed to. I usually didn't. Sleeping, I didn't eat. Even then, I didn't eat very much. I wasn't a big eater. And Naomisha would eat before she performed, and then afterwards. So not a big deal there, but it was grueling because this was we got 2 Sundays off a month. So the entire time that I was there, I had an entire total of 6 full days off. Now you have to remember, of course, that we started at 8 p.m. So we had the whole app from 1 a.m. until 8 p.m. the next day. That was your free time. So it wasn't bad. And they put us up in an apartment not too far from the club. You still had to drive or take a taxi to get there. You could walk, but it's a long walk. It's a good. I've walked it. I've actually, my second run there. I've made that walk, but not too far, from the club. So, and it was a 2 bedroom apartment, and Naomisha had her room, and I had mine. And what else? We had a guy there who was our driver. He was a brother that was very unique from Atlanta, I believe he was from. No, he was from Cleveland. I'm not going to give out too many people's real names. Naomisha wouldn't mind, but you should look her up on YouTube. Naomisha Wilson, a fantastic singer. You can find her stuff on YouTube. We'll call him Cleveland. So Cleveland was the driver for picking us up at the airport, bringing us to the apartment, and from the apartment every night back and forth in the evenings. Of course, there were some evenings when you could not where he was too busy because it was not just us he had to pick up everybody else that was working the several clubs in the Yokohama area that Hirano had access. He had 3 clubs there, and I worked all 3 eventually. The first one was, I think every other Sunday we were at another club called Khan's Corner, which was a piano club as well. A supper club. That was nice. That was in near the water. But yeah, I digress. So anyway, Cleveland was a brother from Cleveland and spoke fluent Kansai Japanese. Just like in America, you got the Eastern dialect and the Californian dialect, Texas. In Japan, they have different dialects with the Japanese. And he spoke Kansai Bon. And really interesting guy. Had a wife and kids in Kobe. He was there during the great earthquake. His house cracked in 2. He ended up losing his job. He had to move to Yokohama. They stayed there. He moved to Yokohama and ended up getting a girlfriend there. And that's one of the stories I'm going to talk about tonight. Again, children, not to listen to this cast tonight. So anyway, we're working at the Baby Grand. All right, so the stories that you guys are here to hear, I am here to tell you. So the Baby Grand was the most interesting thing that you could imagine. From whatever, boy or girl, don't matter, whatever your viewpoint is. Because when the girls got drunk, this was around 10:30, 11 o'clock every night. When the girls got drunk, things started happening. Now, if you can imagine, I'm sitting there and I'm playing piano. Well, we have something called MD. So MD, hey Shine. So we're there with an MD player. An MD player played these cartridges that you could, just like a cassette tape. It was a format that I don't know why it didn't take off, but in any case, we had the backing tracks on that. I was at the grand piano and I was playing above those tracks and singing backgrounds. Naomisha was doing songs. She was singing the popular songs of the time and also some oldies, R&B hits and things like that, because this was the 90s and R&B was king and the Japanese loved R&B. So to fly people, let's just be honest, 2 African Americans over to perform it for them live was kind of the thing at the time. And I had to learn a lot of songs. I'm sorry, I haven't got. Oh, I'm getting there. I had to learn a lot of songs. A real quick time. We had 2 months. We had to do a demo, video demo, send that over. They saw that we looked good. Then I had to sit down and I had to learn a lot of songs. And I'm talking about songs that I didn't. Again, my background was jazz and country music and whatever came on the radio. I didn't get into R&B and rock music. I didn't get into R&B a whole lot until I started having to produce it. I knew it, of course. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, but it wasn't my living and dying thing. But with that gig, I got a first class education in R&B songs because I had to play them. I had to learn how the chords, and this wasn't, and I couldn't read. I don't read very well. I took the piano lessons, of course, from Miss Gallagher when I was younger. But my reading skills are poor, but my listening skills are excellent. I have a very good ear. And I had Richard. So the things that I was stuck on, I'd go to Richard and say, "Hey, Richard, how do you play this?" And he would show it to me. I'd be, "Okay, I got it." Go home, practice it, and get a whole set down. And the set had to be 15 songs. So we had a 15 song set that we could vary. So you could vary that, but you had to add new material in every month or so, or the set got stale, even if you rotated those 15 songs. So imagine me, I'm sitting there and I'm playing Baby, Baby, Baby. Baby, Baby, Baby from TLC. Naomi singing it. I'm da da da. I'm playing the chords on the piano and doing, the backups on it. And I'm looking over, I've got time. After the first few weeks, I was comfortable. I was settled in. I said, okay, my nervous jitters, because I had never done anything like that, playing, on a professional level like that, where you had to be on. When the spotlight came on, you were on. And so also first class education in performing as well, playing and performing. In that case, the piano, later the guitar. But really, so you can imagine me sitting there and I'm playing the set. Now, Amisha's singing, and I look over and I see this guy sitting back, and he's got his coat over his lap, and the coat is going up and down. Right? I'm playing piano, and I'm looking at this, and it took me about 3.3 seconds to register what I was looking at. And I thought to myself, this is about week 2 of me arriving. And by the way, one other digression, it was dead of winter. This was the first time I lived in snow. It was snow up to here. It had snowed really heavy that winter of 94 going into 95, 95 going into 96. And and I'm wearing all leather shoes. So walking down the street, I'm sliding everywhere. So I had learned a lot on that first trip about a lot of things. 'Cause I come from California. I drove up to the snow. The snow didn't come to me in LA. I look over and the coat's moving up and down, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is going to be something. And boy, I wasn't wrong. The baby grand had they had nights where the girls would come in what they called lingerie night. So, even Naomi was asked to participate, but she declined. Some of the other girl singers that I work with later, they didn't. They would come out, they would go out shopping. Oh, I'm gonna wear this, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm gonna watch. Fortunately, and the guys would wear pajamas. And so me and Naomi were like, nah, Even I eventually got into it myself. I wore pajamas one night, but on my first run, I was like, nah, I'm not doing that. So Naomi and I were there for those lingerie nights, and those lingerie nights usually were some of the most it got down to, it was pretty X-rated. I mean, some of those girls weren't wearing a lot, and then it got real X-rated one night when they had these three AV is adult video stars come to the club and perform a strip tease right in front of me in front of the piano. And I'm talking about they were very acrobatic. They could stretch pretty good. And again, I'm sitting, I got the best seat in the house. I'm sitting at the piano, watching this. And it was wild. It was wild. And the girls at the club, you would think at 1 p.m. they're all drunk and they're all toasty, that they would say, okay, that's a night, let's wrap it up and go home. But no, across the street, there was a host club. Now, a host club is the opposite of a hostess club, and they're full of guys who are there to serve women. And host clubs, ironically, gee, I wonder why, they open up around 1 a.m. So, and they're good looking guys, right? So they're like, what Japanese women consider to be looking. They all look like a bunch of kins to me, but in any case, it's what the women found attractive. So the girls would go over across the street to that club after they were done, literally across the street. There was one client, by the way, for that pajama party that they had. He rented an apartment down the street from the club just so that he could show up to the club in his pajamas. He didn't have to change in the club. That's how deep these guys were. And this place was packed every night. And we're talking about Yakuzas too. Well, we'll get into that into a minute. A lot of Yakuzas. Guys, actually really cool guys once you get to know them. But in any case, unless you cross them, and then it's a whole different story. So the host club across the street, so we get offered some nights, hey, they want some live entertainment at the host club. Would you mind picking up some extra money? Usually about $500. The split between the two of us, go over there and perform. Sure, fine, no problem, let's go. So we went over to the host club one night across the street after the baby grand was locking up. And I got over there, and it was wild, man. The girls were drunk. They were like grabbing on these guys. These girls had just got finished servicing these old dudes. They took the money that they got from the old dudes, went across the street to give it to the young dudes. I'm not lying. It's just like pachinko, where you win a prize, but you got to take it to a booth to exchange for cash. It's a lot of convoluted things that happen in Japan. So yeah, they went over there, and I'm performing and whatnot. I'm singing too a little bit by that point too. They had a little piano, and I would add in my little two licks or two, and Misha would join in or do a song. And these dudes, man, I look up one night and there's like a full-on like orgy going on in the corner. Okay, like 3-4 guys and these 2 chicks, and so I says to myself, okay, this is some wild stuff. This is just wild. This was nightlife. This was something that I hadn't experienced. You have to understand, even though I worked in the studio system in Los Angeles, I didn't see. Okay, there was one studio party that I attended that was pretty raunchy, but it was just let's bring in a stripper kind of thing. It wasn't like this. This was just, the whole thing was really raunchy. Fun as hell though. just I didn't. And Naomisha, she knew it, so she was like, oh, whatever. She honestly did not care. It didn't faze her one bit. So you just kind of roll with it. All right, so let's stop that particular period of time and let's fast forward. Needless to say, I finished that gig. I got back to LA. I was working a job at a Kinko's. Yeah, imagine going from that to getting back to LA and taking a job at a Kinko's. And just a part-time job. I was okay with money, but I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I had been gone for 3 months, and I was trying to pick up whatever kind of remixing gigs or whatever I could, but I had to find another job. And I was working there, and I knew the guy who owned the shop, so he offered me a job as a manager. So I was actually managing it for a brief period. I would say I lasted 6 weeks. No, a little bit longer than that, maybe 2 months. When I was telling the guys the exact same stories I'm telling you now. And this one dude looked at me and he said, "Well, what are you doing here?" And I said to myself, "Yeah, what am I doing here?" So I found another singer, Sharon, and we went back. I think I was back in the States for a total of about 3 months, and then I was back to Japan again. And again at the Baby Grand with Sharon, and so yeah, that was how that went. Now, fast forward 2 years later, I'm still working for Toronto, but I'm in a city called Nagoya. Now, Nagoya, honestly, it's a little bit. It's up near Kobe. It's a little bit. If you were thinking in terms of California, for example, it's like going from Los Angeles to San Francisco. So we're up there in Nagoya. I at that point was just a keyboard player. This is about, yeah, a couple of years later. Hirano hired me on as a just a keyboard player for the live band that played at this huge club that he had up there. It was an impersonation club. Well, it was a R&B club and a person. So what he would do is he would bring in impersonators from the States. Sometimes they had their own backing music. Sometimes the house band had to play. I was in the house band. I was the keyboard player. I could never work with another one singer again. More trouble than they're worth. Well, if you sleep with them, it kind of evens things out. It worked for me. In any case, yeah, so it really, really was a crazy place, Nagoya. If you think Yokohama and Tokyo, and I haven't even told a lot. I'm going to save a lot of this. I'm just skipping through because I want to keep this short because I could be here for 2 hours. But there were a lot of drugs in Tokyo. There was a keyboard player that I know, we'll call him Phil, who probably was the most brilliant keyboard player that I've ever heard or seen since. And I'm not exaggerating. This guy, in terms of an R&B or whatever key, just a keyboard player, it seated Prince, he had seated Stevie Wonder, he had seated everybody that I knew, and I could sit there and listen to him and watch him play. Always wants their own way, and you can't do anything about it. Yeah, that's true too. But that's in a studio setting. I told you that I worked in the studio in Los Angeles with a lot of R&B singers, and I could give you what was her name? Make It Last Forever McGee. I forget her first name. So she did that Make It Last Forever with Keith Sweat. And Jock and I, we were producing together, we were doing something together, and we went down to the studio to go look about maybe getting a track on her album that came out, because that R&B hit was such a success for her that she got signed to MCA. Got in the room, man, she was just yelling at the two producer guys that were there, like, "This is my album, I want it like this. You guys, and it's like they had this look on their face like, God, do we really want to do this?" And me and Jock just turned around and went out the door. So yeah, I know what you mean. So Nagoya, yeah, really just the most hedonistic place that I've been to in my life. This is Nagoya, 1997. and working for Hirano at his this was a huge club. This was a huge club. I cannot impress on how big of this had a huge dining room, a proper stage with proper lighting, booth up above to do the audio and everything, kitchen in the back, dressing room, proper dressing rooms for the artists. I spent many hours playing pinochle in, playing cards with the guys in the band. Um, and just the most hedonistic city you can imagine. There were drugs in Yokohama. Phil, that I was talking about, brilliant piano, but he was just a druggie. He was able to get literally whatever he wanted. I remember one night I was driving him to a gig in Tokyo, and he pulls out this little silver wrapper thing, and there's a chunk of hashish in. He's like, "Hey, you want this?" Like, holy shit. And I would be honest with you guys. I'm a practical person. If somebody offers me something like that and nobody else knows that I have it, I'll take it and I'll put it away because I might be able to use it for something. Somebody else might want it. Hey, I got that. I'm not, above refuse. If it was hard drugs, I'd say no. But I live here in Amsterdam. Again, I'm not going to criticize marijuana. Marijuana is what it is. So and that's how it was with him. He just had drugs with him on him all the time. He gave me a ring. He was, I'm sorry, that's a whole nother story. So, but drugs. So I got to Nagoya, and I worked in a club that was called Motown. And Motown was the top club in Nagoya. As a matter of fact, speaking of Stevie Wonder, when he came to play Japan and he was playing Nagoya, he came to Motown and sat in with the house band. And I was sometime house band there. Again, another thing where it was Sunday nights, and we had open night where all the bands that were working in all Hirano's towns, we would go in there and we would all sit in and jam, and that was pretty fun. You get cut really bad too if you are not playing well or if you weren't up to snuff. You get embarrassed real fast, and I very rarely. I went up and played sometimes, but I very rarely did it because no, those brothers we're talking about drums, real bass, real guitar, keyboards. We're talking about live music. So I learned, let me just sit back and if I'm feeling it and I'm feeling particularly good, I'll go in. But my God, all the other things that were going on with that. The hostesses latched on to the black R&B guys. I had to swat those chicks off with a fly swatter. I kid you not. As if it was some kind, like you were some kind of door prize or something. It was like, oh, I got him, or yeah, I was with him, and they were spinning there in Nagoya. The hostess level went up. We're talking about these women were getting thousands of dollars from these guys, and they were turning around and spending, buying these brothers. I saw this brother had the most beautiful, sapphire ring. Is oh yeah, this such and such gave it to me. Buying rings and suits and all sorts of stuff, and I wasn't having it. See, these brothers were a lot of East Coast brothers. And their attitude, East Coast brothers' attitudes on things were a lot different from West Coast brothers. We are by nature laid back in a way in that regard compared to the East Coast where you got to be on all the time. And so I learned a lot of respect for these guys, but these were serious. They were older too. A lot of them were in their late 30s, 40s. Some of them in their 50s. Some of them in their 60s. This one guy, one night we're at that club, the supper club, the impersonation club, and I'm hearing this, and this girl moaning. And this 60-year-old, same age as I am now, is banging one of the 20-year-old waitresses in the back room, in the cloakroom. Loud, too. She was loud. Okay? So that was that situation. Brothers would smoke a reefer, in the back of the club. I'll go back and get a smoke, or mostly drinking, though. Some of them were doing worse. Fighting over girls, fighting and physically getting into fist fights over these Japanese women. Hey, thank you for coming in. Just watch the rerun on this so you can pick up. You take care. See ya. Thanks for stopping by. Fist fights that were happening over these women. And the last story I'll tell for tonight, and I literally have hundreds, but I'm just tonight I just want to give you a little flavor of what it was like. So the sex, the drugs, the music, it was all there. It was real. It was that kind of scene. It was sex, drugs, and music. And I was in there and I wasn't having it. I didn't like being the idea of being treated like a piece of meat by these these hostess women. And I certainly didn't need anybody to buy me anything. There was a British photographer lady that was there. As a matter of fact, I still have a picture that she took of me in the club that time. Or maybe I'll show it to you guys one of these days to see what I look like. Not that much different. And a lot younger though. And she was also cruising the musicians. And she invited me out to her house. She had been there for years and she had a little place out there in the woods. And she invited me to come out. Oh, why don't you come out some weekend with me? And I wasn't having that either. I was like, I'm 28, 29 years old. I got this 40-year-old British woman hitting on me. It just wasn't happening. I later on saw her in a nice club, supper club that I like to go to in Nagoya, walking in holding hands with two black chicks. So it was just, guys, I'm just being real with you. I'm just telling you that it was a freaky situation. I knew, by the way, those were two singers and they were both known lesbians. So anyway, it was a lot of wild stuff going on. And last story for tonight. So it was an impersonation club. So Hirano brought over a guy named Scorpio, who was a Michael Jackson impersonator. And this guy who was an Elvis impersonator and his wife, both from Vegas, who was a Marilyn Monroe impersonator. And they were the ones that were doing for the month that I was there. Then I went to LA to do some buying for the club, came back. And it was a different set. But this night with this particular, next was Whitney and Stevie Wonder. But anyway, for this one, it was these three. And they didn't get along at all. Scorpio, I saw him years later in LA when I was there at a Sheila E. concert. And I just pretended like I didn't see him. I actually turned and walked the other direction because this brother, he had gotten a lot of surgery to look like Michael Jackson, and he had the hair, his hair was long, and he had the nose surgery and everything. It's just he had a gut. He looked like Michael Jackson in the face who had hung out with Homer Simpson too long. I'm just telling you the truth. He could do the moves. He could sing the songs somewhat live, actually. We would actually do them live. He didn't sing to a vocal track like Elvis and Marilyn did with their show, although we did have to play for Marilyn. So I had to learn those Marilyn Monroe tunes from back in the 50s. I had to learn how to play those. That's what kind of gig it was. And I had to learn a lot of Michael Jackson. She's like, I'll be there. I had to play that and a few things. But one night, Hirano's Japanese assistant was sick. This poor guy. Hirano was not very kind to him. He was another Japanese guy, but he worked that guy to death. Literally put him in the hospital. And this is with kidney failure. Okay, which in turn, I think the same thing happened to Hirano, so a little bit of karma there. But anyway, he worked this guy right. He couldn't make it. He was just too sick to come. And Hirano asked me if I would drive that night, drive everybody home. And I had driven for Hirano down in Yokohama. We'll get to the story another time. But when I came back the second time, the third time, after Sharon and I left, I flew myself back. And I took a gopher job. I wasn't just playing. I was also driving in Yokohama. So when I got to Nagoya, Hirano, I had my international license. I had driven the car actually from Yokohama to Nagoya. And he asked me if I would, with the van, he wanted it up in Nagoya. I said, fine. So I brought it up, and he asked me if I would drive them that night. And so I'm in the front seat of the car. Got Marilyn in her full outfit, still with the wig on and makeup. Elvis with his Elvis collar up and his thing on, and Scorpio, not he had taken off the Michael Jackson outfit, but he still looked like Michael Jackson. And the Elvis impersonator says something to Scorpio. Scorpio was he was a really nice guy, but he was another one of those guys I've met in my life that if you say the wrong thing, it'll go south real fast. And he was a black belt. He was dangerous, if you excuse the pun. And he says something. Elvis says something to Scorpio, and I'm driving. I hear a commotion in the back. I look in the rearview mirror, and I'm watching Michael Jackson choking out Elvis with Marilyn Monroe screaming "ah" in the background. That's the truth. And I didn't know whether to laugh or to pull over. It's just true story. With this other brother, I forget what his name is. These guys were in this seat, and so Michael was leaning over. There was two seats of the van. The very back seat, this one guy, singer I knew, was in the back with Scorpio. The two were in the seat, and Michael Jackson, Scorpio was just choking him over the seat. Oh, God, man. It was nuts. It was nuts. All right, so I'm going to end that there with these particular stories. I've got a lot more that I will seed in, or maybe next week we'll do Tokyo Stories Part 2. One last thing tonight, so let's change subjects real quick. Let's talk about something that I learned from Fern this week. So, as you know, I got the Epiphone SG Standard. And as you know, this is a great place to talk. I love talking about these things here because I can fill you in on the details. The Epiphone really, and by the way, guys, just to go back, I'm sorry that the Tokyo stories were a little, X-rated, but I really want to, and I'm not even being as graphic as I could be. But I just want you to get a flavor for what that was like. It was insane. It was the best time. If you weren't, hell, they were selling, magic mushrooms were not illegal in Japan at the time. So literally they were selling them on the streets. There was guys that had pop-up stands in Tokyo selling shrooms. This was an insane time. It was a great time. You had to have been there. You really missed it if you weren't. It was something. It was really a great time. Anyway, so I got the SG, I got it down to Fern, and I was talking to him about last week we were talking about, I also took as well the Epiphone 59 standard. So I took the 59 and the SG down to him, and we started talking about necks, because as you know, we're having a little bit of a neck issue with the Epiphone. Fortunately, we've sorted it out, so it doesn't have to go anywhere. I won't be trading that guitar. I'll be keeping it because we sorted it out. But it was sorted out through what he was saying to me. It takes about a year for the neck on your new guitar set. So when you get it from the factory, or from the store, when it's delivered to your house, it really takes about a year for that neck to set in your guitar. It has to get acclimated to your environment that you're in, and as well as the other conditions of taking it out, gigging with it or whatnot. It really takes a while for that net. And it's with this piece of breathing, living wood, so in itself needs to set. The paints need to set, the tensions and all those things with the string. All of that takes about a year, Fern was saying to me. So he said, if you've got a guitar that you've just bought, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, this neck keeps going off, or it's got a lot of fret buzz or things like that. As bad as it sounds, really give your guitar time. Really should be having him set up professionally, like with a guy like Fern. But if you can do it yourself, but give your guitar time. Give it time. I had that Epiphone 59 for over a year now, and it did go south on us. We've made a second correction to it, and now it's actually perfect. So yeah, it took a year and a bit for that to settle to the point where I'm checking it out every day, and it seems to be fine. So just something I wanted to add out there before we close out tonight is there he was telling me about one bass maker. The guy makes bass guitars. He sets his necks in the bodies, and he lets them sit in his shed for a year before he'll take them out to finish them. Because when he sells it to the client, he wants to know that that neck is settled. So something to think about, something that I certainly hadn't thought about, and it was new for me to learn. So yeah, it's going to take a year for this Epiphone SG to set, but so far it seems pretty good. All right, guys, that's it for tonight. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to tune in, whether you watch the live stream or if you are watching this as a replay. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please take the time to do so. I'd love to have you here as a subscriber, as a member of this community that we have growing here. Until the next live stream or to the next show, you guys take care. Bye-bye.